let's read another scary skinwalker story. I decided to join my bestie Karen for a 3-day stay at her grandmother's place on the res. Her grandmother lives near a place called Tuba City, Arizona, in the middle of nowhere but surrounded by rural homes. We go to college together, and I was kind of interested to know about Navajo tradition. The first day we stayed, it was pretty chill, nothing out of the ordinary, but then her grandma said that a stray dog came out of nowhere and wouldn't leave. To me, it did act kind of strange and was ugly looking. Black, shaggy coat, looked like a mix between a German Shepherd and a lab. That night, we were watching a movie in the living room with the curtains wide open. Grandma was in the kitchen cooking dinner, and we were watching a movie. Next to the window is a medium-sized bookshelf and where DVDs are kept. Karen went to put back a DVD we had just watched, but she freaked out because that stray black dog was staring at us through the window, standing on top of the wood box outside. Not something normal dogs do from my point of view or hers. The other dogs seemed to stay away from it. Karen opened the door and yelled at it to get off the box. It ran off behind the shed. We went to Tuba City to get some groceries, came back to the house. The dog was nowhere to be seen, nothing unusual. Grandma went to visit some people, so it was just Karen and I. About 5 o'clock, we heard someone trying to open the door. Both of us looked outside since there had been no car heard and no dogs barking. Looking out the living room window to the door, and there was the dog trying to open the door with its paws. 2 paws wrapped around the brass doorknob, standing on its hind legs. I thought that was weird, but wasn't really freaked out. Karen was, though. She opened the door and chased it off. Grandma came back later, and Karen told her what happened. Grandma didn't like what she heard. We got ready to go to sleep. We slept in the spare bedroom since it had 2 beds. One window with curtains, open just a little. We turned off the light, but there was a sound coming from on top of the roof. Pitter-patter footsteps and scratching sounds and panting. It then sounded like it jumped off onto the large plastic water barrel they had. At first we heard what sounded like barking, but as it grew louder, the other dogs seemed to be barking at something also. But all of a sudden, something was running around the house barking, and it was no dog. Nope, it wasn't. This barking sounded human. A deep male voice barking like it knew that we knew that it wasn't a dog. Karen decided to open the curtains to look out. There was the stray dog on its hind legs looking into our bedroom, but this time it stunk. And what I thought were 2 black holes in the neck, another pair of eyes twinkled, and the paws were deformed-looking hands with overgrown, somewhat thick and sharp fingernails. Again, both screaming and shutting the curtains closed. Grandma comes running through the door, and she sees it. First thing she did was grab ashes from the fireplace, load 3 shells into the shotgun from under her bed, bless herself in Navajo, and went outside to shoot it, yelling in Navajo about how the thing wasn't welcome there and to get the hell out of there for it to go linger somewhere else. Them both being traditional, the next day they called a medicine man to come over and put cedar in. He prayed over everyone with cedar smoke and an eagle feather. Blessed the place. He made us eat bitter herbs called eagle's gull or something like that, and gave me an arrowhead. Apparently I needed to carry one for protection and a little pouch called corn pollen. Seems to work pretty well. The medicine man said that the dog was a skinwalker, which in Navajo is a long word, but I call them Yoshis. The body of a stray dog, which was unalived by the skinwalker, made an illusion so we wouldn't know it was a real dog. He also said that Yoshis tend to harm people by using some sort of human bone straw to spit at someone. Doctors can't detect it, but the medicine man that day pulled a piece of human skull out of Grandma's right shoulder. Pretty big, about 2 inches long and 1 centimeter thick. It was real because we watched him pull it out of her. That was intense. This is one of the stories that I included in my podcast episode that comes out tonight at midnight. So if you want to hear more spooky skinwalker stories, be sure to listen to my podcast tomorrow.
When the lights go down and the public are gone, something stares in Harrogate.
You join me in Harrogate, North Yorkshire, in a rather unassuming haunted location, a Turkish baths, where the ghost of a white-haired lady has been seen by the public and numerous staff members.
Now this is a location I am exceptionally excited to show you, given the owners do not let any sorts of paranormal investigators in here after dark, so you really are getting an exclusive look inside the Turkish bath spas. This is one of the best examples of a Victorian spa probably in the country. Opening in 1897, it was for the opulent royal baths. The tiles were vibrant, hydrotherapy was to be found within, a relatively new thing during the Victorian period. They loved things to be mechanical, and various therapies would go on inside. But a strange ghost has chosen to stick around and has been seen by countless people over the years. There's got to be some truth to this ghost. And we're not just talking knocks and bangs. The full-bodied apparition of this woman is seen so frequently, it's leaving the public terrified. Just behind me we have cubicle number 13, where the ghost of the white-haired lady is most commonly seen. Our ghost tour guide this evening, Paul, has actually seen the ghost peeping her head out of the cubicle, and when it was investigated, nobody was inside. In its heyday, the original Royal Baths was absolutely gigantic and continued to operate as so until it lost the National Health Service contract in 1969. As a result of this, some sections of the building were turned into a restaurant and tourist centre. Could it be this renovation that has stirred up a ghost within? The infamous Phantom has gained a strong reputation with staff members, but many have a different viewpoint on the ghost. Some like her presence, others feel threatened, claiming she has actually pushed them and pulled their hair. One particularly noteworthy incident happened when a yoga teacher had hired out the baths after hours for a one-on-one session with another lady. As they were walking through the baths, her companion shouted hello and waved to somebody in another room. This stopped her in her tracks, for nobody else should have been there. They had the building to themselves. So the yoga teacher asks her, "Who are you talking to?" "Well, the old lady in that room," she said. And the yoga teacher walks back, peeps in her head, and there's nobody there. But her friend is adamant she did indeed see an elderly lady sat in a rocking chair in that room, going gently back and forth. She described the woman perfectly, as solid as me and you, long white hair and wearing a white gown that had a frilled collar and sleeves. But an interesting aspect here, not only did the ghost herself vanish, but also the rocking chair she was sat within. So I bet you're wondering, did I have any paranormal experiences that evening? Well, as myself and Paul were investigating some of the upper corridors, indeed we did have an experience.
Almost like something affecting me. That might have been the door opening. Let's close this again. I did hear it. Oh, we're there. They weren't there before. It was this, dude. That's what it was. Did you hear it?
Yeah, I know what it is, yeah.
That is literally. That's the sound. Shut the front door.
It was. Yeah,
Shut
it
the.
was.
We came up here before and they weren't there.
Well, why would anyone do that?
No.
I heard that.
Dude, I heard it. When I went through that, I thought it was the door making a sound.
So did I.
We're there, look, it's on.
Following this, we both heard the sound of a woman sighing in a rather wheezy, breathy voice. If this has got you hooked for more, check out the Harrogate Ghost Walk. Paul has got plenty more to tell you about the area.
If you're already laying in bed, do not go back outside. Today I'm wearing these earrings that Pauline sent me to my P.O. box. They're like little Christmas wreaths. This lady's name is Mariana. She is 44 years old and she is from Manzanillo. The story that she's about to tell us happened a year ago in July, and she doesn't know if it was just like a weird coincidence or it was something paranormal. At the time, she was working at a convenience store and she would leave work every day at 9 p.m. She remembers this day clearly because it was a Friday and she was off Saturday and Sunday, so she always looked forward to sleeping in. She also didn't have a boyfriend at the time, so she explains how her routine was the same every single day. She would go to work, she would go home, she would eat, she would shower, and she would go to sleep. At the time, she also stopped going out to parties and things like that, so she really didn't hang out with her friends very often. So that Friday, just like her regular routine, she went home, she ate, she took a shower. She said that she went to bed around 11 p.m. and then she was awoken at 2 a.m. because her phone was ringing. When she glances at her phone, she notices that it's her best friend, and she just decided to not pick it up because she really wanted to go to sleep. However, she noticed that the calls were frequent and they kept calling and calling her, so she thought it was an emergency and she ends up answering the phone. When she answers, she asks her best friend, "Hey, is everything okay? What's going on?" And her friend, loud and laughing, was like, "Wake up, you're gonna go party with us, we're going to the beach." Her friend tells her that she has other friends there and that her husband will be driving. Her friend was like, "Don't be a party pooper, let's go, I'm gonna go pick you up." Mariana actually thought about it because she said that she really did need a good distraction, and she imagined herself, with the sun rising at the beach, having the drinks with her friends. She even imagined herself in the car just smelling that beach breeze. And just when she was about to say yes, her father's words came into her mind immediately. "If you're already in bed and somebody calls you out, do not go out." She explains how she even got like goosebumps just thinking about what her dad said, so she actually decided to tell her friend no and lie to her and say that she had to go to work the next day. Her friend ends up telling her, "Come on, don't be boring," and she tries to insist, but she tells her no, and then the call just ends. She laid there for a bit just thinking if she should have gone and maybe she should have said yes, and not even 5 minutes later, she gets another call. It was another friend that was in the car with her best friend trying to convince her to go. She tells her, "Come on, you're already awake, come with us, we're gonna have a good time." She was this close to saying yes again, but again she got that weird feeling that she should not leave her home, so she ended up telling her no and that she is so sorry that she has to work tomorrow, and that was the end of the call. She ends up putting her phone on do not disturb and she goes right back to bed. The following morning, she wakes up at 9 a.m. She looks at her phone and she sees that she has a lot of missed calls. All of the calls were from her best friend, so she did try to call her back, but she didn't answer. She figured maybe her phone had died, or maybe she was still partying or sleeping in or drunk or something. She really didn't give it that much importance, but the days passed. It was Sunday and Monday and she still never heard back from her best friend. Not only was she not answering her phone calls, but she wasn't answering her text messages either. She was starting to get really worried, but she also thought maybe her best friend was really mad at her for not going out with them that night, so she decided to just give her a little bit of space. On Wednesday, while she is at work, she ends up getting a phone call with a number that she didn't recognize, and without thinking, she answered the phone. It was her best friend's mom. The lady says, "Is this Mariana? You're my daughter's best friend." And she tells her, "Yes, can I help you with something?" And she asked if she had heard the news. She explained that the lady started crying, and in between her crying, she ends up telling her that her daughter had passed away that night that they were inviting her to go out with them. They did end up going to the beach, but apparently they had all been drinking, including her friend's husband who was driving and who claimed that he didn't drink. They were hitting a sharp turn on the way to the beach, and the guy lost control and ended up going off a cliff, and every single person in that car passed away. They didn't even find them until Tuesday afternoon. The second she heard all of this, she said that her blood pressure went down. She had to hold on to the wall just so that she wouldn't fall. It was definitely a big shock to her. She couldn't believe that, they had all passed away, that her friend that she had just talked 2 days ago was no longer here. She admits that she ends up hanging up on that lady without even saying anything. She ran to the restroom and she cried like she had never cried before. Her hands were shaking, and the only thing that she could think about in that moment was her dad and that phrase, because that phrase had literally saved her life. So a year and a few months have passed, and she says that she misses her best friend, she loves her, and that every night she does pray for her and thank God and thanks her dad for that phrase that has basically kept her alive.
So I wanted to tell you about my creepiest paranormal experience, and to be fair, over time there's been a few now. I've been to some exceptionally haunted places, infamously haunted, and some that are completely under the radar, like private residences. But the scariest I want to tell you about is probably up in Rivington. Now, many of you might have seen the video that I created that evening, but we ultimately got invited to the Rivington tea rooms because they were experiencing paranormal activity in the form of a poltergeist. So this wasn't just claims, they had actual CCTV to show us. And in the middle of the night, milk jugs that were perfectly secure on the shelf would come flying off. There was other footage of people coming in for, a bit of lunch, coffee, a cake, and being struck on the back of the head and visibly standing up and reacting, of course, quite frightening, and expecting to be confronting somebody behind them, or maybe debris had fell from the ceiling, but of course there was nothing there, and the video caught nothing either except this person's terrified reaction. So ultimately, yes, paranormal groups had started to come into these tea rooms. Now, for some context, why on earth are tea rooms haunted? Well, they're just adjacent to, I think, a chapel dating back to the 1700s and a graveyard. You can see the graveyard outside of the tea room's window, and on the other side you can see a columbarium. Now, that's where ashes are stored. So that's on either side. Again, you might be thinking, why is a graveyard haunted? That doesn't happen. Well, in answer to that sort of question is, over time, lands can shift. Now, this in mind, when the tea rooms were being renovated and the floor was being sorted, they found human bone remains under the floorboards. So, of course, police were alerted just in case it was suspicious, and they investigated it and confirmed indeed the land had shifted over time and it was bones from the graveyard. Now, the owner puts this down, the bones being disturbed, and replanted back in the graveyard, and ultimately ended up under the floor, to the hauntings. The scene set, I'll briefly tell you now about the paranormal encounter we had. So we're investigating with this group that kindly invited me along. Nothing had really happened in the tea rooms of noteworthy. However, we went into the chapel, completely dark. The lights hadn't been on all day, nobody had been in there, it was a Saturday. And we got in there, again, lights were all off, and we were using torches as to not cause any disturbances to the local area. So upon two of us entering, there's this almighty bang against the wooden altar, and it was coming from inside the chapel. So that was the first thing where we thought, oof, the atmosphere's changed now, something's going on. And then lo and behold, the rest of the team come in and investigate. The owner's there, my partner's there, sat on a pew together. They're not doing the investigating, they're just being with us, really. And the team are calling out, and the responses are centering back around this one particular chap named Paul. So that's what was happening. He was getting answers, the rest of us weren't. Now, as he's calling out more and more, we're asking for something to happen to him. In the pitch dark, there's this almighty smash. Now, I thought at that time somebody had thrown a brick through the stained glass window. That's how loud and terrifying it was. Thank God, the main leader of the paranormal group, a chap called Leighton, had a night vision camera on the entire time. So although he was slightly off, from where it was facing, he instantly could catch what was happening. And there's 3 lights on this side, 3 lights on that side. One is swinging crazy, and the glass lampshade, that probably dated back to, I think, 60s or 70s from the style of it, was completely shattered. It was in bits all over the floor and was swinging aggressively. Every other lighting was stationary like this. Something had struck this one with that much force, it had smashed to smithereens. Now, the atmosphere, you could cut it with a knife. Everybody felt that. Lo and behold, got back into the tea rooms, flicked on all the lights, reviewed the footage, and everybody went home, because it was that much of a shock. And, in response to the video, people were watching it saying, oh, these are supposed to be ghost hunters, what did they expect? Well, not that. You know what I mean? You might expect the odd voice to come through or what have you. You don't expect for items to be destructed in front of your very eyes. So yes, people were scared, and there's some foul language on the video, but I've had many encounters of the ghostly nature now. For those who follow me, you'll know that. But this was one of the most over the top.
Never ask your pets if they can talk or if they can understand you. This story scared the fuck out of me, and I don't even have pets. Anyway, that's the title of the story, and this guy why is the dog barking right now? Anyway, this guy's at home relaxing on the couch with his dog and cat, and he's watching TV, scrolling through his phone like we all normally do. He comes across this video that was like a fun kind of video, nothing creepy, nothing spooky, where it's like you should ask your pets if they can talk or if they can understand you. He don't even finish the video where he's like, oh, I'm gonna ask my pet. So he turns the TV off. The dog was on his bed. The cat was sitting right next to the dog, but on the couch. He looks at his pets, and instead of asking them, he says, I know you can talk, and I know that you you understand me. He was like, you guys can't trick me. He was saying it like funny. He thought it was gonna be like a little cute moment with his dog and cat. He says that, yeah, that moment went from what he thought was gonna be funny to what the fuck is going on right now. As soon as he said that, he's looking at his dog and cat, and he says that they both turn to look at each other, turn back to look at him, and he says that they both almost give like a smile. He was in shock. He had this like insane fear that just like jolted him, and he was like, the next thing that I did was start to play with them. He's like, the tension, this like them looking at him, he thinks that he saw them smiling, and he's like, what I decided to do next was play around with them, like, haha, yeah, like this is so fun, this is so funny. I know the fuck it was not. He ends up turning the TV back on because he's like, I just want the moment to come back to where it was before. He turns the TV on. He at this point is ignoring them. He says that they finally just go back to acting, you know, normal, whatever they were doing, and everything was fine. Of course it wasn't fine, because I wouldn't be telling you the story if everything was fine. He says that a few days passed, and unfortunately some weird things were happening. When he would go to bed at night, he would start hearing almost like a human walking inside of his home. Now this part is fucking crazy, but he claims that he also observed how his cat would talk, like call out to him when he was in his room. His dog started just walking on its hind legs, just normally about the house. I mean, that wouldn't necessarily be scary if he hadn't done what he had done. He claims that things would move and that he would lose some stuff. He would get home from work and he would walk into the cat and dog sitting on the couch just staring at him. They started just acting strange. They were doing things that they had not done before. And by this point, he did explain that he was scared that he thought his dog or cat might attack him. So there was one night where he is completely asleep and he is awoken to the sound of glass shattering on the ground. Obviously, he gets up all scared and he starts to see smoke inside of the house. He comes out of his bedroom and he realizes that his entire kitchen is up in flames. He has no idea what happened in the kitchen, but what he does see is that nearby, both his cat and dog are laughing as he comes out of the room. He said that it sounded like they were making fun of him, like they were just laughing. He runs outside of the house like half naked. He starts screaming at his neighbors, screaming at people to come out because the houses are close to each other, and if his house is on fire, it's gonna catch the next door's neighbors. So he's calling everybody to come out. People were calling the police, the firefighters, and they all started to show up because the flames were getting bigger and bigger. When the firefighters got there, obviously they tried to maintain the fire so that it doesn't go to the neighbors or anywhere else. He was actually still worried because he ends up telling them, like, my dog and my cat are inside the house. Like, he's still worried about his pets. They were able to get everything under control and they kind of saved like half of his house. Kind of goes towards the house and he tells the police and the firemen where exactly his pets were inside of the house. The firefighters tell him that when they entered, there was no animals in there. They didn't see any pets running around or anything like that. Time did pass and they also never found like skeletal remains of pets. I think that's how you call it. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but there was never a trace of those pets being burned inside of that house. However, he also never saw his pets again. He doesn't know if they maybe escaped or maybe they did burn with the house but they didn't find them, but yeah, he never saw his pets again after that. I'm not gonna lie, like, them laughing at me as they set the house on fire wouldn't want me to have these pets back again. So I don't know, maybe that was like a blessing in disguise, but he was really worried about his pets being on fire, so I can understand that. But what the fuck, dude, this whole story is fucking crazy. What do you guys think?
Let's read another scary Reddit story. This one is so freaky because it could happen to literally anybody. I had just recently started using Tinder a couple of days before this happened. I had honestly just downloaded the app to mess around because I was bored one night. I was on it one night and saw a girl named Ash that lived about 30 or so miles from me. I decided not to pay for the app to get all the features on it, like seeing who liked you and being able to message people, but this girl had her Snapchat in her bio. I thought she looked pretty attractive, and she said she was looking for people to talk to, so I added her on my Snapchat. I ended up going to sleep a little bit after that. The next day while I was at work, she added me back. We started talking about casual things like where we went to school, if we had part-time jobs, and stuff like that. This went on for about 3 days, until one night I texted her and she didn't respond for a bit. I didn't think much of it, as she was probably hanging out with her friends, as she had posted something on her story with her friends and her messing around a few hours earlier. I went back to playing my Xbox in my room, and next thing I know, I see a message from her a couple hours later with nothing but just a period. I kind of just blew it off and sent a question mark. Seconds later, she opened up my message but didn't respond. I waited a couple of minutes and then sent, "Hello?" She immediately opened it but didn't say anything. I tried again and sent, "What's up?" in the chat. Again, she immediately opened it but didn't respond. By this time, it was around midnight, and I thought maybe she was tired and just didn't want to have a conversation, so I didn't think that much about it. It was still a little offsetting, though. About 10 minutes later, my phone went off again. I saw it was Ash, and she had sent a video to me. I was kind of confused, but opened it anyways. What I saw was weird. It was a guy about 20 years old, hitting a vape for about 5 seconds straight. Then he blew it all out of his mouth right at her phone, and said in a giggly voice, "She doesn't like you, bro, and I'm going to beat your ass for bothering her." I thought nothing of it, as I knew I had obviously just been pranked. A few minutes later, she sent me another message. It was another video. I opened it up, and it was that guy again. She was videoing them in a car, and he was cranking up the car. After he cranked it up, he looked at the camera with a grin on his face and said, "We're coming to your house." As I said earlier, she only lived about 30 miles from my house, and you could take the highway basically all the way there. A few minutes went by, and I checked my snap map, and I saw they were heading south down the highway straight towards the town I live in. I still didn't believe it, though, and didn't think to turn my location off either. About 20 to 25 minutes went by, and I decided to check my snap map again. This whole time I had been still playing my Xbox, and it was kind of in the back of my mind at this point. What I saw when I opened my snap map was horrifying. It was showing Ash's Bitmoji on the street west of me in the same neighborhood. I called a couple of my friends, but none of them picked up. A couple of minutes later, I got a snap from Ash saying, "Where are you at?" I didn't answer. I just closed the app. Right after, she sent another message saying the same exact thing. I closed the app out again and turned the lights off in my bedroom. I also turned off my location and lied down in bed. About an hour and a half went by and nothing happened, but I was terrified. I eventually went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I turned my phone back on and checked my Snapchat. I turned my location back on as well and saw that Ash was back at the town she lived in. I saw she had added a new picture to her story, and I looked at it. She had posted it about 7 hours earlier at about 1:30 in the morning. It was a picture of a street in pure darkness beside street lamps, and the caption, "Road Trip," with the city's name that I live in. This story is a really good lesson. Do not have your location turned on anything. This is an older Reddit post. I don't have Snapchat anymore. I haven't had it for like 4 years. So I don't know if you can still like show your location on there, but if you can, you definitely should not do that. You never know who you're really talking to. So just be safe on the dating apps and all of the other apps. That could literally happen to anybody, and that's so creepy. We don't even know if Ash is like actually who she is in her pictures. That could have been like some big ass dude. Who knows? Anyway, let it be a lesson. Let's read a scary stalker story I found on Reddit. A few years ago, my anxiety was high. I was already at a point in my life where I thought I was a little out of it, but that was amplified by a lot when I kept repeatedly hearing noises outside of my window, like every single night. It just wouldn't stop. I would finally get so freaked out, I'd go wake up my parents and get them to look outside, but they never found anything. I started to think I was crazy or just subconsciously seeking attention. One morning, my grandfather discovered one of our lawn chairs beneath our bathroom window. It's pretty high up and the bottom pane is fogged, so I'm not sure the chair even helped, but it was left there regardless. The next night, heard sounds again. Nothing. The night after, however, we checked outside and discovered something that made my stomach churn. A small stepladder was sitting directly outside of my window, back just enough to allow someone to sit on it but still see. On my windowsill was a bag of now cold McDonald's, which is just up the street from me. Most of the food was still in there, but still, Some fucker had just been watching me doing absolutely nothing of interest in my room without me knowing for I don't know how long. The cops were called, nothing happened. I felt crazier than ever. No one was to be found, but at least we had some evidence that someone that shouldn't be hovering around our house was at my window, watching intently through the blinds in a space between the two chairs. Heard noises the next night, ran outside, nothing. Earlier in the night, I had sewn my curtains together, which hopefully made it harder to see in. Apparently it did, because now the fucker had taken to climbing on top of our air conditioning unit, and from there, climbing onto our garbage can, then standing on that so he could hopefully see above where the drapes went. The handprints and shoe prints were left on the lid to prove it. I should also mention that there were now holes in my screen, and I heard those holes be created. He took a stick and sharpened it somehow. We found it outside of my window, and was trying to stealthily break away the screen bit by bit. The hole is still there. The next night, I distinctly heard the gravel near my window crunch. There was simply no mistaking my sound. As stealthily as I could, I let out a small moan he surely heard and rolled over just out of view as if I were sleeping, then pressed myself against a wall out of view of the window, very quietly opened my door and crept down the hall. My heart was pounding. Normally I knock on my parents' door, but I knew the slightest sound would make the bastard bolt, so I quietly opened the door and snuck in, then informed them that there was, without a single doubt, someone outside my window. They didn't mind the intrusion and got up, got dressed, formulated a plan, and crept to the back door. I ran to the bathroom to stand on the edge of our tub and peek out the window just as the back door was thrown open and my parents ran outside like morons. And sure enough, they saw him. They started screaming as the man leapt off the garbage can and bolted down our driveway, which is what I was looking at. They screamed all sorts of horrible things at the top of their lungs. He ended up escaping across the street, hiding behind a house adjacent to us. The balls on this bastard. He kept peeking out at us as we all stood outside, but we wanted to leave him there so the cops could finally nab him. They were called, they came, and they searched, but they never found him. Bastard must have hopped a fence or something. Still to this day I hear sounds outside my window, even in the dead of winter, but he's never out there. He might have just been a peeper, but he targeted me specifically for months until he was almost caught. What really pisses me off is that once he lost interest in me because it was too unsafe, he moved onto a house down the street with 2 little girls. He actually managed to get in through their window, and their dad caught him just standing in the middle of the room watching them sleep. I still don't think he was caught even then. All I know is that it could have been way worse, but it messed me up. I trust the men in my neighborhood even less now. The men around here stare very blatantly. I've been chased home by one. I've had a guy try to jerk me into his car while I was passing him, telling him no, I didn't need a ride, and to leave me alone. All these years later, I still hear shit outside my window and freak out. I turn out my lights entirely to exercise. I do my best to avoid the windows when I undress. It just scarred me. That is horrible that he has not been caught.
তুমি কিন্তু আমার একটা ভিডিও কল করো না সোনিয়া অ্যাঞ্জেল সোনিয়া
তুমি কি শুরু করছো?
আরে আমি করলামটা কি আমি যেখানে বয়ে আছি
এই আমার ফোন দাও দাও কইতাছি
ছাড়ুম না
কি দাও ছাড়ো কইতাছি আমার ফোন দিব না আমি
এইটা আমগো খানদানি রীতি তুই বুঝছ না
আব্বা গতকালকে রাত্রে বেলা এমন সেটিং দিছি
আব্বা ফোন দিয়ে কি করেন আপনি
এই কথা কই গান শুনি এই আর কি
বাস এই দুইটা কামের জন্য
হায় হায় করছে কি আমার খানদানির ইজ্জতের ফালুদা খেয়ালাইছে
তবা কস কি এত বড় বদ জামাই
হারামজাদা আমার মা
শাহজাহানের সাজদা বাগান হুয়ে গেছে গা
শাহজাহান হুনো না
কও
বুঝার পারলাম না বাড়ি মারলা আমারে কান্দলা আমি কাঁদুম তুমি কাঁদতাছো কেলা
তারপর আর কি সারা রাত কই আসলো কি করছে আমি জানি না আমার লাগে কেউ
আপনি তো আপনার শ্বশুর বাড়িতে গিয়া ঠিকই হ্যাঁ নিয়ম কানুন অক্ষরে অক্ষরে পালন করছেন আর আমারতে আয়া মিছা গপ
তুমি কি কইবার লাগছো এগুলা তোমার কি মাথা আউট হয়ে গেছে নি এত বড় স্পর্ধা আমারে আদেশ আর আমি যে তোর রুমে আইছি রাইতে ঘুমাইছি
থেকে আমাকে বাসে শান্তি সব চলে গেছে।
হায় হায় খাইছে করছোটা কি তুমি?
তুমি একটা ভিডিও কল করে পাঠাও প্লিজ প্লিজ। কবে আমগো দেখা
করছেনটা কি এটা আব্বার লগে? এমন চিপা মাইটা দিয়েছেন? কেমন খানদান বউ? তারপর তো ভয় কাচে মুচু খায়া গেছে গা। তারপর আবার দুর্নাম করতে হইব। এই তোর কি তোর দামি ফোন?
আইসা বাবজান রাইতে ঠিকঠাক মতো ঘুমাইছে তো নাকি বাসায় গিয়া আব্বাজান রে কইবেন?
কি করছো যে এটা তুই? বাজার রে বাজার যাও চুইছে আজকাই করছে।
সম্মান সব পঞ্চার করে দিছে।
মাগার দোষ আমারও আছে, আমি একটু বেশি বাড়াবাড়ি করে ফেলছি। চলো না আমরা বাড়িতে ফিরে যাই।
তুমি কি পাগল হয়ে গেছো নি? এটাই আমার বাড়ি এখনতে।
চৌধুরী সাহেবের সাথে আমি কি কথা কইছি? তুমি কোনো কথাই কই নাই কা? সাজান তোমারে কইলো এত
দিচ্ছেন, হ্যাঁ দিচ্ছেন না? এলা বাইরন, আমার বাড়িতে বাইরন।
একটা হাসা করছেন আব্বাজান। আপনার পোলার এই বাড়ি কোনো ওই বিতলামি করলে আমি তোরা ঘাড়াই, কিন্তু ভাবলাম আপনাকে একমাত্র পোলা ঘাড়াইলে আবার দিলে চোট পাই।
দিতাছো তুমি?
শোনো, তোমাগো খানদানে যেমন কিছু নিয়ম আছে আমাগো খানদানেও আছে।
এইসব ফাত্রা নিয়ম কেউ যেন জানবার না পারে, মনে থাকবো তো? তোর যে নতুন বাবি ফাইনাল ডিসিশন লয়ে লইছি, আজকে রাতে কিন্তু আপনার লগেই ঘুমাবো।
আমার লগে কেন বাজান? আপনি আমার লগে ঘুমাইবেন কেন?
জিন্দেগি তুই এইটা আর পোষাইতে পারবি না। বাজার তোর আমি সাজিয়ে দিতাছি তুই জলদি।
ক্যাচে লাগাইছে।
মা তুই এক কাম কর, জামাই লইয়া শ্বশুরবাড়ি জাগা। হন মা, শ্বশুর
এই তো একেবারে বাঘের বাচ্চা।
ফুদি দে।
আচ্ছা বাঘের মতন যাবি?
আমি কইতাছি ওখানে খুইলা আসো, নালে আমি টাইনা ছিড়া ফেলামু কইলাম।
আমার খানদানি পোশাক তুমি টাইনা ছিঁড়া ফেলাইবা?
আমার ফোন দাও।
নিবারা আমারে কইছো বন্ধুর লগে কথা কও, তুমি তো এঞ্জেল সোনিয়ার লগে কথা কও কি?
তারপর বউরে দিয়া হাত পাটি পাইছে, এর বাদে বউরে কইছে পানি লয়ে আহো। বউ পানি লয়ে আইছে, এই পানি দিচ্ছে ফালায়া।
আম্মা আব্বা রুডি সুরত দেখছেন? রুডি এরকম তেরে বাগা খেলা, হ্যাঁ রুডি সুন্দর। আব্বা আমারে না হয় তুমি বুঝাইলা, তুমি তোমার খানদানের কি বুঝাইবা, আমার আত্মীয় স্বজনের কি বুঝাইবা?
আমি দুঃখিত।
বইয়ের হাতে মার খাওয়া চলে, তাই কিছু কই নাই কা।
আমাগো খানদানে জামাই মারনের নিয়ম নাই কা।
তুই আমার এখান থেকে যাবি না মানে কি? অক্ষণ তুই বেরোবি।
আব্বা
কুইল যে কাপে না?
ওই বেটা ওই তোর কইলজা কাপে না মিছা কথা কইতে, হ্যাঁ? হারাম খোর জানি কোনখানকার।
মাগার মারামারিতে এক নম্বর।
আমি পারি। এখন মনটা চাইতেছে তোমার কান্দের উপর চড়ায় একটা আসান মারি।
ঠিক আছে ভাই, তাহলে আমার মুখ চুপ বন্ধ থাকবো, আর কেউ আমি কিছু কমু না, মুখে কষ্টি।
এখন লাইনে আইছস।
Let's read a scary stalker story I found on Reddit. A few years ago, my anxiety was high. I was already at a point in my life where I thought I was a little out of it, but that was amplified by a lot when I kept repeatedly hearing noises outside of my window, like every single night. It just wouldn't stop. I would finally get so freaked out, I'd go wake up my parents and get them to look outside, but they never found anything. I started to think I was crazy or just subconsciously seeking attention. One morning, my grandfather discovered one of our lawn chairs beneath our bathroom window. It's pretty high up and the bottom pane is fogged, so I'm not sure the chair even helped, but it was left there regardless. The next night, heard sounds again. Nothing. The night after, however, we checked outside and discovered something that made my stomach churn. A small stepladder was sitting directly outside of my window, back just enough to allow someone to sit on it but still see. On my windowsill was a bag of now cold McDonald's, which is just up the street from me. Most of the food was still in there, but still, some fucker had just been watching me doing absolutely nothing of interest in my room without me knowing for I don't know how long. The cops were called, nothing happened. I felt crazier than ever. No one was to be found, but at least we had some evidence that someone that shouldn't be hovering around our house was at my window, watching intently through the blinds in a space between the two chairs. Heard noises the next night, ran outside, nothing. Earlier in the night, I had sewn my curtains together, which hopefully made it harder to see in. Apparently it did, because now the fucker had taken to climbing on top of our air conditioning unit, and from there, climbing onto our garbage can, then standing on that so he could hopefully see above where the drapes went. The handprints and shoe prints were left on the lid to prove it. I should also mention that there were now holes in my screen, and I heard those holes be created. He took a stick and sharpened it somehow. We found it outside of my window, and was trying to stealthily break away the screen bit by bit. The hole is still there. The next night, I distinctly heard the gravel near my window crunch. There was simply no mistaking my sound. As stealthily as I could, I let out a small moan he surely heard and rolled over just out of view as if I were sleeping, then pressed myself against a wall out of view of the window, very quietly opened my door and crept down the hall. My heart was pounding. Normally I knock on my parents' door, but I knew the slightest sound would make the bastard bolt, so I quietly opened the door and snuck in, then informed them that there was, without a single doubt, someone outside my window. They didn't mind the intrusion and got up, got dressed, formulated a plan, and crept to the back door. I ran to the bathroom to stand on the edge of our tub and peek out the window just as the back door was thrown open and my parents ran outside like morons. And sure enough, they saw him. They started screaming as the man leapt off the garbage can and bolted down our driveway, which is what I was looking at. They screamed all sorts of horrible things at the top of their lungs. He ended up escaping across the street, hiding behind a house adjacent to us. The balls on this bastard. He kept peeking out at us as we all stood outside, but we wanted to leave him there so the cops could finally nab him. They were called, they came, and they searched, but they never found him. Bastard must have hopped a fence or something. Still to this day I hear sounds outside my window, even in the dead of winter, but he's never out there. He might have just been a peeper, but he targeted me specifically for months until he was almost caught. What really pisses me off is that once he lost interest in me because it was too unsafe, he moved onto a house down the street with 2 little girls. He actually managed to get in through their window, and their dad caught him just standing in the middle of the room watching them sleep. I still don't think he was caught even then. All I know is that it could have been way worse, but it messed me up. I trust the men in my neighborhood even less now. The men around here stare very blatantly. I've been chased home by one. I've had a guy try to jerk me into his car while I was passing him, telling him no, I didn't need a ride, and to leave me alone. All these years later, I still hear shit outside my window and freak out. I turn out my lights entirely to exercise. I do my best to avoid the windows when I undress. It just scarred me. That is horrible that he has not been caught.